guys, Jody here, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jody, and I love the arts. And on my channel, I mostly talk about books, television, and theater. So if you like any of those things, be sure to stick around because I'm certainly going to be talking about one of those things today. So today I'll be continuing my Broadway show series where I talk about every Broadway show I've ever seen. And in today's video, I'll be talking about the fourth Broadway show I ever saw, which was a stage adaptation of the iconic film Saturday Night Fever. So you may be thinking to yourself about now, wait, Saturday Night Fever was a musical? Yes, it was. So in this video, I'll talk a bit on why Saturday Night Fever is the Broadway musical is so important to me, who was in the cast, who was on the creative team, any favorite songs or moments I liked from the show, how I liked the show, and anything interesting I may find in the playbook along the way. So without any further ado, let's get on to today's video. So before I get into anything, my mom wanted me to say how Saturday Night Fever is her favorite Broadway show ever. So there you go, Mom. Everybody knows Saturday Night Fever is your favorite Broadway show ever. It's one of my favorites too as well. So Saturday Night Fever, the Broadway musical, is such a special show for me, and because you know, like how when you like things, you know, I'm gonna put theater for example. If you like theater, and you know you're like you're seeing shows and stuff, and then there's that one show where you're like, I want to see that show. I want to see that show more, and I want to see every Broadway show, and anyone who's in that cast of that show, I want to see them in other shows, and I want to just become super knowledgeable about Broadway and theater and everything like that. So yes, Saturday Night Fever was that show where I was always a fan of the performing arts and theater, but it was a show that made me become like a super fan of the performing arts, theater, and Broadway. So super thankful for this show because because of this show I found my thing in life that I really enjoy and love. And what was also so special about this show in particular was I had seen 3 shows on Broadway up to this point: Footloose, Beauty and the Beast, and Rent. And what was different about Saturday Night Fever versus those other shows was that Saturday Night Fever I had seen fairly early on into the show's run. I believe the show opened in October of 1999. I saw it in April 2000. So with the other shows that I had seen, like I said, Footloose, Beauty and the Beast, and Rent, I had seen those shows a few years after they had officially opened. So this was the first show that I had seen within a few months, you know, after it opened, so within the year that it opened. So I got to see the original cast, which was just super exciting and fun and something I never gotten to do before. So yeah. Okay, so now moving on to who was in the cast. So I remember just by heart, just because like I said, I'm a super fan of this show, I'm a super fan of this cast, and I remembered most of the people in this show by memory because like I said, after I saw them in this show, I wanted to see any show that they would do afterwards because, gotta support anyone who was in Saturday Night Fever on Broadway. I will see any show you do. So, yeah, I remembered most of the cast, not everyone, but so, I did remind myself by looking in the playbook before to remind myself anyone I might have forgotten. But, yeah, so I'll get to the page now that shows the credits and all that stuff. So here's, where the show played, the credits of, the show title, the cast, the creative team, the director, all that fun stuff. And then here is a page with the leads and supporting characters. So there are quite a few people on as understudies the day I went to see the show. And I love understudies because they help the show go on. You got to support understudies. Because it's so fun seeing understudies on occasion, not on occasion, but always. Because sometimes they go on as an understudy, but then they might be the lead in their next show, and then you could say, I saw them in another show, at the start of their career. So I'll just show you a little bit of who was out that day. Isn't that I like how the Saturday Night Fever icon is on all of them. A lot of people went on that day. A lot of people were out of the performance that day. Got a few pieces of paper here to show you. So, and last but not least. Okay, so as far as who was the leads in that show, I guess when they were there, James Carbonell did play Tony Manero. He was out of the show the day I went to see it, and if you're familiar with theater and Broadway, you may recognize James Carbonell's name because he went on to do Rock of Ages, and he was in Xanadu for a brief period of time. I'll get to the whole Xanadu stuff in another video. I don't want to make this video too long, but he was in Xanadu, and fun fact, he was originally cast as Link Larkin in Hairspray on Broadway, but decided to turn that part down to do a movie instead. So originally he was going to play Link Larkin, and Matthew Morrison was supposed to be his understudy. So that's a bit of a fun fact for you. And Orfeh was also at the show the day I went to see it. I just love Orfeh. She went on to do Legally Blonde and Pretty Woman, and Paul Castry was in the show. I've seen him in so many shows. The only shows I can remember off the top of my head right now is he was in Disaster and 9 to 5, but he's been in like so many shows. And Brian Bate, who you may recognize his name from Mad Men. Before he did Mad Men, he did Broadway and theater. And then Richard H. Blake was in it. Oh my gosh. Richard H. Blake has been in like literally so many of my favorite Broadway shows. The Wedding Singer, Legally Blonde. He was also in Matilda and A Bronx Tale. He did Wicked, Jersey Boys. He's done a lot of shows, but he was in some of my absolute favorites. Sean Palmer was also in this show. Sean Palmer you may recognize from The Little Mermaid. He was also in the original Sex and the City. And yeah, let's see. I'll get to the chorus, swings, and understudies page now. There you go. Really, really large cast. It was like a really fun production, you know? Okay, so the only people on this page that catch my eye, as though I have seen them in other shows since Saturday Night Fever on Broadway, Christopher Cusack, who actually I did see, he was an understudy, and I did see him go on for a character because somebody was out. Well, actually, right, I think the person that, I'm going to get to this. I'm going to find that piece of paper. Yeah, okay, so he went on for Gus, which is normally played by Richard H. Blake. So he went on for Gus. Yeah, I forgot to say, Richard H. Blake actually did go on to play Tony Manero at that performance. There you go. And so yeah, Christopher Cusack, so I did see, I guess he was an understudy, like I said, and I did see him in that performance, so that's pretty cool. But I did see him, I believe, the first time I saw Wicked, he went on as an understudy for Fiyero. Yeah, because I don't know, if you're familiar with Broadway, Norbert Leo Butz, I think, was out of the show for a brief period of time when the show had begun. So the understudy went on, and Christopher Cusack was the understudy for that. So I saw him in Wicked, too. And then I also saw him in First Date at some point, years later. And then let's see who anyone else I may recognize. Andre Ward was in Saturday Night Fever. And I'm such a fan of Andre Ward. I love Xanadu. He was also in the Jimmy Buffett musical Margaritaville. I believe that was in 2018. And I think he might even be in Moulin Rouge right now. I know he was in Moulin Rouge at some point. Oh, he was also in Something Rotten, I believe. He's done a lot of shows too. But Xanadu is one of my favorites, so I love Andre Ward. And Casey Nicola, who you may recognize now as a Broadway director. He has directed The Prom, Mean Girls, The Book of Mormon, Some Like It Hot. He was in Saturday Night Fever back in the day. There you go. A huge Broadway director now. And one of my favorite shows. And I've loved the shows he's directed. The Prom is one of my favorites. Yeah, so as far as who is on the creative team, I really didn't recognize anybody's name from like other shows I have seen since then, but obviously the Bee Gees contributed to the score for Saturday Night Fever, so I'm familiar with the Bee Gees, and their songs are wonderful, iconic, and just so fun to listen to. And so, as far as, you know, any favorite songs or moments I may have liked in the show, I'll get to the page with the songs. Sorry. So, there you go. Ah, the understudy slips almost fell out. Sorry. Don't want to lose those. Those are good memories. Okay, so, yeah, it's really hard to pick a favorite moment in the show. The whole show itself, I love. I love the show from start to finish. But, well, I was talking about with my mom the other day when I was saying how I was going to make this series, and she's like, oh, you got to mention the beginning of the show. So in the beginning of the show, like, they don't do curtains as much these days on Broadway as they used to. Like, when I first started seeing shows, a curtain, like an actual curtain, would be part of the production. Whereas now they just don't really seem to have them as often. But Saturday Night Fever had a huge curtain with, like, the logo that's on the playbill. and it was like an orange and yellow, and it would rise up as the show would begin, and the first song was Staying Alive, and it was such a moment. There was such an energy in the air, and like I just loved like the choreography for that number. Like they would all be doing like the famous Saturday Night Fever pose, I think, and then they would just all like be out. Everybody on the cast would be like throughout the stage, like, but then they would all come together into the center, and then like it was just a really good number. I really liked it. I liked almost everything in the show. It's like, you know, You Should Be Dancing, More Than a Woman, Night Fever. Let's see. How Deep Is Your Love? Love that moment. What Kind of Fool? And I believe there was a number called Nights on Broadway, which I believe was specifically the Bee Gees wrote for the Broadway production. I could be wrong about that, but I think that particular song was made for the actual Broadway show. And I think, oh yes, and I'm not positive about this, but I think Tragedy, that Bobby C sings, who is Paul Castry in the show, played by Paul Castry, that was also written for the show. I could be wrong on those things, but I'm pretty sure Tragedy and Nights on Broadway was specifically written for the show, and they are great songs. Yeah, I love the whole show. I mean, the whole show. Nights, the first moment of the show, Nights, Staying Alive. I really like that moment, but I love them all. I love the whole show. I love everything about it. I love the choreography, the performances. Like I said, I just love this show. I love this cast. It was just great. A great moment in time for me, because, you know, I was getting to see shows. And so what else do I want to talk about? Oh, anything interesting I may find in the playbill along the way. So I kind of like looked, you know, in the playbill a little bit to remind myself I like to look in to see what was going on at that time. So if you see, I saw the show in early April 2000. So there you go. And they had an article in here about the Wild Party, and I never actually got to see the Wild Party, but if you know theater, there were two different productions of the Wild Party. There was one that Mandy Patinkin was in with Toni Collette and Eartha Kitt, and then there was another production that Idina Menzel was in. I never got to see either production, but they have a whole article in here about the one Mandy Patinkin was in. There you go. I thought that was fun. I haven't read it yet, but or reread it. Probably read it at the time, but yeah. And here's something about Sherry Jones, one of the best stage actors ever. I saw her in so many shows, but we'll get to that when I get to those videos where I saw what shows that I saw her in. But one of the best stage actors ever, and I'm so thankful to have seen her on Broadway. Because, you know, like I said, one of the best actors ever. Let's see. I think that may be it. Oh, and you may be saying to yourself, "Wow, Jody, you got a whole lot of signatures there. You must have stayed at the stage door forever that day." And the thing is, I didn't actually do the stage door for my first time seeing the show. I did do it my second and third time seeing the show, because I saw those shows on my own versus this one where it was a bus trip. Actually, every fall and every spring on Broadway, they do, Broadway does a fundraiser for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. And so this was a fundraiser thing you could get. You know what I mean? Like, I think actually this was in 2000, so keep that in mind. But this was only $10 to get a playbill of the whole cast signature, and I'm pretty sure now it'd probably be like $100, because the prices, as I saw more and more shows and as the years went on, the prices got more expensive for things like this. So yeah, it was only $10 at the time, and it's definitely like a memory and a souvenir that, you know, I will never get rid of, because it was my first time seeing one of my favorite shows. And yeah, so that's gonna be it for today's video. Let me know in the comments if you ever saw Saturday Night Fever on Broadway, or have you ever seen a production of Saturday Night Fever. Let me know how you liked it in the comments below. And also, what was the last Broadway show you ever saw? So that's gonna be it for today's video. And I was gonna say, give a hint on what my next Broadway show was, but you know, these shows I'm talking about were 20 years ago, so I can't actually remember off the top of my head. But yeah, stay tuned for my next video where I talk about my 5th Broadway show. And yeah, so thank you so very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And that's gonna be it for today's video. Until next time, bye.